There's been some tweets going around recently about how the DCU is going to be connected, and this time it is literally coming from James Gunn himself, so this is actual reliable information we can trust. Now, he's been getting into some conversations with people about what is going to be in store with the connectivity of DC, and he's commented that DC is going to be connected through film, TV, and animation. And then he even also adds that some video games are going to be connected to the DCU. And I've heard this conversation, or simply just people discussing this topic. Is James Gunn going to be employing the Star Wars connectivity over into the DCU? So let's look at Star Wars for a second here. They have had a model of consistency. And no, I'm not talking a model of consistency within good movies or good projects, because some are a lot worse than others. I'm talking about consistency in the sense of world building and somewhat storytelling. They have been capable of focusing on one connectivity from the beginning of its lifespan. It isn't like comic books within Marvel and DC, where they deal with parallel dimensions and different timelines and different versions of characters. In Star Wars, simply put, there isn't an Earth 1 or an Earth 2 or an Earth 5496. There is only one connected Star Wars universe. Now, throughout Star Wars lifespan, there have been a collection of video games and comic books and novels that are no longer canon to the main timeline and are now considered legends. And of course, a lot of that comes from when Disney bought the merger and subsequently started to destroy the Star Wars story. Although, with my little rip into Disney there, I will say that even if George Lucas did make Star Wars 7, 8, and 9, he wasn't going to move forward with the story that these comic creators created for Star Wars after episode 6. Because if you look at all the novels and the comic books that come after Star Wars episode 6, they span so far that I'm pretty sure it goes like 200-300 years into the future. George Lucas would have done a movie that takes place with the main core, Luke, Han, and Leia, after number 6. So a lot of the stories that were told in the comic books weren't necessarily going to be canon anyways, because George had his own vision. For example, my favorite Star Wars character ever created is actually the apprentice to Darth Vader from the Star Wars Force Unleashed video games. Absolutely love that character, but I completely understand why he is Legends material. He is not canon to the main timeline. This is where it gets a little complicating, because how do you look at Star Wars Legends? Do you look at Star Wars Legends as in stories that are told in different dimensions of Star Wars? Do you look at them as stories that are maybe passed down by people around the galaxy? They're basically just legends or fairy tales? Or do you look at them another way? And I think it's all dependent on how you, a viewer and a fan of Star Wars, want to look at Legends material. There are a ton of content that have been stripped from canon and put into Legends that a lot of us one day hope they find a way to rework and bring it back into the main timeline. Star Wars does not have the opportunity to sit here and say, hey, all the movies you see are connected, but then all the video games you see are separate from the movies, but connected in their own ways, which allows these creatives, these studios, these companies to create their own versions of beloved characters and to create the stories they want without needing to follow guidelines and abide by the rules that are presented in film or on TV. It is a fantastic way to have people's passion for these characters to come through different types of mediums so they can tell the story they've always wanted to tell without confining it into one continuity. One continuity is certainly a good thing, but I think it does work a lot better in comic books or in film. And as I was saying, with Star Wars, you don't have that opportunity. All the video games, all the movies, all the cartoons, all the comic books, all take place in one Star Wars timeline. Now, of course, Star Wars could always take a different turn with that because a couple years ago, Dave Filoni created the world between worlds in Rebels. And as much as some people might want to say that is not used as a time travel or a dimensional type of travel unit, it absolutely is. You can change history, you can change timelines. It is Star Wars' own version of dimensional time travel. There could be a day where maybe Star Wars heads down a route where maybe there will be a Earth 1, Earth 2 type of situation. Maybe they will do different stories in different continuities. I mean, that's a little reason why we love DC and Marvel so much, because we get to play around with different variations of our beloved characters, but that's also what makes Star Wars so unique, is they don't play around with that. You might have this sensation that other dimensions may exist in the Star Wars universe, but we never dive deep into that. We keep it as one solidified continuity, and that's what makes it special. Now, to talk about it from DC's perspective, how would we take an IP like DC, who have been playing around with dimensional travel since the dawn of its creation in the 30s, a universe where we are so used to it being expansive and somewhat all over the place? How are we going to solidify it to one? And it might be a lot simpler than it seems. Whereas the DCU will be contained into one solidified universe, there will still be other universes going on. It's just going to be a lot cleaner than it has been before. When you look at the state of DC right now, let's look at the different dimensions they currently have in progress right now. And as much as I'm going to be able to count out, there are probably going to be a lot that I'm missing out on or forgetting. Number one, comic books. And even within comic books, they're constantly playing around with tons of different continuities, dimensions, different Earths. They have a story in the Prime Earth, but then they have a story in Earth 3 that has nothing to do with Prime Earth and blah, blah, blah. So comic books are a huge expanse of continuities, time travel, and dimensions. Then you have the DCEU, or what we are now calling the DCU, the Reevesverse, Todd Phillips' Joker universe, CW, Titans. Then you have all the video games. You have DC Universe Online, the Arkham series, which is now going to be including the Suicide Squad game, even Gotham Knights, which has nothing to do with the Arkham universe itself. We even have a Wonder Woman video game too. Not exactly sure how that's going to fit into the timeline, if it's going to be connected to any timeline in general. Then you have animated projects, tons of different types of animated movies that are ripped straight from comic books, or you literally have the DCAU, which is its own mini universe on its own. James Gunn is making a lot of moves in DC right now. The DCU, I think, moving forward from here will be refined in the sense that the CW is done. All these other live action TV shows that are being created will be wiped out, and new TV shows will come in to take its place to be fit into the DCU. Yes, I know there are some people who do follow the CW shows, the Arrowverse to be exact, but once again, that's not the DCU. That is its own universe. I still cannot tell you how many people I have talked to who are confused that it does not take place in the DCU. So that's something James Gunn is certainly going to fix. Animation too, whereas I do think there are going to be some studios who make animation that take place outside of the DCU, I think James Gunn is going to finally take advantage of DC's fantastic animation department, and he will make maybe short form cartoons or maybe an hour and 15-minute films that do somehow take place in the DCU as well. Video games are definitely an interesting one. I mean, I don't even think Marvel has done any type of video game that ties into the MCU. And let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that, but I can't think of one video game that does tie into their overall universe. With video games, it can be a little bit tricky because the whole point of having a connected universe in film, you want everybody to watch your movie or to watch your show. Even tying in animation can be hard because not everybody is into animated projects. So tying in a video game to an overall cinematic universe can be a little bit difficult because there are even more people who don't play video games rather than watch animation. So it would be hard to tie in a video game so prominently to a cinematic universe when not many people play video games, and then you lose interest from that majority of an audience. Although I still think there are ways they can do it where maybe the video game takes place in a piece of James Gunn DCU and it maybe doesn't have too much of an overall impact in the story that they tell through film. Now, as much as I am into this, as much as I am interested to see the DCU be much more connected in all different avenues of media, I will say I do hope we still have places of DC that don't take place too prominently in the DCU or just simply don't take place in the DCU as a whole. I would like to see the continuation of the Arkhamverse wherever they go after Suicide Squad. If they ever chose to do another Batman game or another Justice League character in general, I don't want that to be in the DCU. Of course, I want that to continue to be its own separate thing. When things aren't always connected to an overall arcing universe, you do have your own potential to be able to be as creative as you want, to do things without confinement, to do things without expecting by the end of it, it needs to fall in line with this or this or this. Especially with video games, I do think it is important that, you know what, okay, from time to time, you can make a video game that correlates with the DCU. But I think the vast majority of video games needs to stay its own separate thing. I think overall, James Gunn trying to connect all these different forms of media into one universe is actually very interesting, and I think it finally gives us a form of consistency. I just really hope not everything starts to become DCU related. For example, when people talk about Marvel nowadays, how many of them are actually talking about the Marvel comic books? How many of them are talking about Marvel video games other than Spider-Man, and it's obvious because it's Spider-Man? How many of these people are talking about Marvel animation? It's because a lot of Marvel today is just centered off of the MCU. And I mean, it's 100% understandable because look at the massive Goliath that the MCU has created in the film industry today, but Marvel is not much else without its MCU. And I know that doesn't really bother them or anyone who likes Marvel because they are continuously successful. Although with DC, yes, we have struggled with a continuous storyline within the cinematic universe. James Gunn is obviously going to fix that now. But I like the fact that if I don't want to watch the DCU, I can go over here and watch the DCAU, the animated universe. Or if I'm bored of that, I can go over here and I can play the Batman Arkhamverse. Or I can go up into this corner and I can read DC comic books. I like the fact that DC still embraces that there are other stories to be told that don't need to be in the DCU. I have absolutely no problem with James Gunn connecting more things to the DCU, refining things and cleaning things up and keeping it very stable. I just hope it's not overly too much that will be connected to the DCU. I hope we still get video games that aren't connected. I hope we still get animation that aren't connected. But when it comes to movies and film, connect everything. That's good with me. But as per usual, now I want to hear your thoughts down below. I want to know what you guys think of this, and if you think it's a good idea to connect video games, animation, TV, movies into one universe. And also let me know if you want more or less space for diverse of DC content that can be told in all forms of media. But as per usual, that's all I got for you on this one, guys. And until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.